Well, hello. We're very happy to be here, and thank you so much for bringing us and convening this really incredible group. We've learned so much from everybody, and it's, being the one holding the microphone doesn't mean that we're not taking so much away from this, so appreciation all around. As Aneta said, I'm Savannah. I head IDEO's Emerging Tech Lab, and this is my imaginary friend Seth. It'll make more sense once he starts talking. A quick overview of, that's all the people that heard him talk yesterday. A quick overview of just kind of stance on AI and on generative AI. So the thing that we've all been hearing about so much for the last year or so is generative AI. But for quite some time, our stance has been around, rather than artificial intelligence, which is a term that really distances us from the technology and takes kind of our agency away from us, thinking about augmented intelligence. So to Madeline's point, how do we think of these as systems that are augmenting and working alongside us and are a part of our world rather than something that is different from us and separate and can feel more like an enemy? So how do we think about augmented intelligence, which is using AI to enhance humans' capabilities? And if I had to give you a quick summary of my personal thoughts right now about what's happening, is that AI has and will change life as we know it. It's not just that it's come out in the last couple of years, it's been in research for many decades, and we all interact with many AI systems through our technology and through other parts of our daily life on a day-to-day basis. So it already has changed our life, and it will continue to change our lives in many ways. We can't ignore it. It's not something that we can just say, no, this won't exist. It is going to be evolving from all different corners of the planet and all different industries and ecosystems and types of people. There are incredible opportunities, but we need to proceed with intention. And we're really in a place where, as these technologies are evolving, we're in a great moment to kind of take a step back and think about, how do we really want to interact with these technologies? How do we want them to fit into our lives? How do we want to design the systems and the products and the services that are using them?
So we're zeroing in and really focusing specifically on generative AI, which is the kind of large language model-driven things that have emerged into the mainstream in the last year and a half. So these are OpenAI's GPT models, Mistral, Anthropic's Claude, Google's Gemini, Midjourney, things like that. Because what's happening with this is that in the space of design, it's influencing both the process of how designers do the work, as well as John was kind of talking about earlier, the kinds of products and services that are possible. And so we want to look at a few examples of some experiments and things that are happening that are demonstrative of the kind of affordances of generative AI, as well as things that kind of start to ask us to think about, what does it mean to design responsibly? And what are the kinds of things we need to be mindful of as we design? So I'm going to just take a look at an example from IDEO related to material design and thinking about how generative AI enables a designer to look at possibilities that might not have naturally occurred or been emergent. And so, we all know that design is often not a linear process. And the same is true if we think about how we might incorporate something like a Midjourney or an LLM into the initial design process. In this case, you can imagine how a designer might be able to start by describing some of what they need. Do you need a material that is durable, resilient, yet comforting, right? Using natural language and being able to get some material ideas that are generated by the machine, right? Now, in this case, the machine doesn't actually have to be an expert. The machine just needs to be the provocateur. because the person is the expert. If the machine says something absurd and stupid, like, why don't you use dynamite? You just discard it. You're like, that was dumb, right? But in this case, what we started to see was the machine suggesting certain natural products and processes. So whereas we might naturally think about more synthetic materials, it was starting to suggest things that are naturally occurring materials. And that creates a little bit of a spark of interest, right? And so as the expert who is actually working with the machine in a complementary manner, you can take that on and now you start to think, yes, what if we were using seaweed and moss instead of cotton and linen, for instance? And so then out of that, you start to look around at, okay, so materials have limitations and constraints on them. What are the kinds of forms that might be suggested by this? And so, you can look at it, and this is where you can, again, feed this back in. You put it into something like an image generator. What would a home goods product constructed of seaweed and moss start to look like? And again, if it gives you something absurd and ridiculous, you discard, but you keep tweaking and playing around with it, and something starts to emerge. You can see it could be a ball, but it could be something like an athletic shoe or a beachwear shoe. You can look at this blending of different things. Okay, what would it look like if we were to take this form of a chair and think about this material of the seaweed? And it starts to give you something a bit emergent that wouldn't have otherwise occurred to us, right? So this is the use of these kinds of tools in the process of design, where you have, it's not going to replace the expert, right? Just as John said. It's the expert that is still driving and piloting and controlling this, but it can act as a very provocative partner in a way that, if you're sitting in IDEO and you're surrounded by 5 other brilliant people, a lot of this happens, right? This is already something that might be happening. But there are lots of designers that don't have that happening for them all the time. Or you might have that team, but it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you know that they're going to be real mad at you if you call them up to be like, I've got an idea I want to talk about. Midjourney doesn't care if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. It'll play around with all of your ideas, right? Now, you should be mindful that if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, your ability to discern what is an absurd idea that should immediately be chucked out will be diminished. Regardless, this is part of how it influences the design process.
Thank you. That's kind of looking at augmentation of our design process and switching gears here into thinking about who is going to be using the tools and services that we create, who is going to be shaped by what we create. So we did some proactive research with Gen Z about a year ago to understand their perspectives on generative AI. And as somebody who is definitely not Gen Z, just enjoys stealing from their fashion taste sometimes, their perspectives are so different and so compelling and so important to the products and services and kind of access to influence that we have, that it was really important for us to lay these foundations in order to do the work that we do. Gen Z is more and more at this stage entering the workforce. They're being impacted by the advent of these technologies and by their existence, but for the most part, they're not in the room to shape them. And so we did a bunch of social listening, which means that we went onto social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram. We did what you should never do and read the comments section. We watched a bunch of videos that were all telling us perspectives that Gen Z has on generative AI. We then took those perspectives and started to shape different design provocations, concepts, and ideas. And then we did co-creation sessions. We brought together panels of Gen Z folks and asked them for their thoughts on the ideas that we had come up with and to help us shape them and redesign them so that they actually made sense for them. So first off, a couple of the design provocations. The first is this passion coach. And so this is a tool that can understand you and your interests and your passions and your hobbies and can help you figure out how to approach those. A lot of the thing that young people are constantly doing is just trying to understand themselves and their place in the world and what they might want to do. And so this is an automated tool that can kind of look at you and see you as a person and say, you know what, there might be a good opportunity for you to connect with these people or this place or try and experiment with this thing. The AI friend, which I'm sad that we didn't call the friend, with AI in the middle, is a friend that can be inside of your friend group. And if you're talking to your friends and looking for a restaurant recommendation or you're planning a trip, it can give you suggestions. Or if there's conflict brewing, then it can start to mediate that. So rather than thinking about just having an AI who is your constant companion and is you alone by yourself talking to this, actually integrating it into your social life. And so there are a bunch more concepts, but a couple of the principles that came out of our research were, first being, deepen my connections, don't close them down. So AI-driven connections, not AI-driven interfaces. Utilize GenAI to curate creative communities, ensuring access and seamless connections to like-minded people with similar objectives. So really thinking about this as a connective tool and as a way of bringing people together, as a way of creating more collaboration, more friendship, pushing against the loneliness that we're seeing so much of today. They also said, help me live my best life, but don't live it for me. So allow me the opportunity to experience learning moments for myself, empowering me with tools and information that help me navigate these moments with intentionality and care. So they don't want everything to just be perfect and streamlined and simplified. They want to have the experience of navigating and understanding what the possibilities are for them and for their lives and for their friends. Which is similar to honor the messiness of being human, don't pretend we're perfect. Help me show up as the perfectly imperfect human that I am. So again, as a millennial, my impulse to technology is make this as easy for me as possible and take the pain away and automate and augment and just try to make things simple so that I can go and live my life. And Gen Z doesn't want that. They want to live their lives. They want to have the experiences of heartbreak and hard things happen and messing up, and they don't want technology to just completely streamline and take things away, which I think we can learn a lot from as well. And I can learn a lot from as a designer in just allowing for that messiness, allowing for that imperfection, and being more open to the possibilities of technology in that way.
So there's a few things we want to share as far as just some considerations about designing with AI and designing for AI use cases. So starting with some of the big cautions, right? These both have to do with the way we use AI in design and the way that we design for AI products and services, right? Which is to the point that Aneta mentioned earlier. Yesterday I was talking about how I think the tools are morally neutral. But the pushback that we were talking through this morning was the idea that while the tools may be morally neutral, we don't actually all agree on that, the people who have designed the tools and who have made them have their own set of biases and commitments and values, and those tend to show up in the tools. So the tools have biases. And that doesn't mean that you can't figure out ways to work around or even subvert the biases, but it is almost maliciously naive to pretend that they're not there. One is to be cautious. I think we should all be cautious about this across the board in terms of software, but particularly in terms of the kind of software that can kind of mimic human capabilities, that it is particularly primed for exploitation towards monetization. So that's something we want to be very careful about, that we're not creating exploitative tools. And in the example that Savannah's talking about, a lot of it comes from understanding what are the things people actually want and need and value versus trying to manipulate and drive them towards certain things that we want them to want. One that I feel like is pressing on all of our attention every day is the point of misinformation and manipulation, and just being cognizant of the fact that AI can make us believe that the Princess of England is fully well and there's no problem at all in terms of her current existence, when those of us that know that that's not true. And what I really mean is, what I just said might be true and it might not be true. And we have no way of knowing, just because there was a manipulated photo released, what that actually means. These things can drive misinformation from all sides, right? From any different angle. And being aware of the fact that that is a thing that is possible, all of us, it's kind of like our attention to information accuracy needs to be at a level that it has never been before. And finally, there's a lot of important considerations around privacy. Both questions of where the data that these models have come from, where the data that these models use has come from, as well as the data that we're inputting and that we're feeding, how that's being used as well. But at the same time, there are some really, really valuable affordances to consider. It does create some possibilities that, in terms of the idea of how does it augment human existence. So, we've put together these kind of, Savannah, put together these 5 cards, using the royal we, by which I mean Savannah, just around different affordances that AI creates. So, the names are the third hand, the second skin, the detective, the lens, and the chameleon. So thinking about ways that you can actually assist yourself, that you can almost create a capability that you don't actually have and be able to leverage it. Or to be able to enhance your own skills, to be able to, if we think about the example of the material design, it's the kind of thing that probably a designer working with those materials in that scenario could do, but you can do it a lot faster with a different level of thoroughness, considering more things in that way. The detective is just about sifting through the noise, as there's lots and lots and lots of information you could be considerate of. How do you find what's signal, what's meaningful? The lens about gaining new perspective. How do you see something in a way that you wouldn't have seen it on your own? How do you broaden what you might consider? And then the chameleon about transforming to understand. How can you put a shift on something that seems like known or conventional? And I feel like this is one that I'm potentially butchering. How do you think about the chameleon?
I think about the fact that we have to be able to see things in new ways. And sometimes it's the evolution of the tools or whatever we're working with that needs to inform how we're seeing things. And so there's sort of a reverse inspiration that can happen.
Yeah, totally. Cool. This has been a really exciting couple days for us. So we just wanted to quickly just say thank you. It's been a real pleasure being with everyone. And we hope you build cool yet responsible things.